welcome to the Ghost of Harrenhal. My name's Simon.
And I'm Mackelly.
Thank you for joining us for episode 180 of our chapter-by-chapter book review of A Song of Ice and Fire by George Martin. Today we'll be discussing chapter 36 of A Storm of Swords. That's Davos 4.
And as you probably know by now, we're going to chat about the chapter and try not to spoil any future plot points for you, and hopefully we're going to provide you some entertainment along the way.
We will summarise what happened, discuss our thoughts on it, provide some useful background, compare it to the television show, indulge in a little pedantry, and cover some relevant news and listener correspondence. Be sure to check out the show notes. They'll provide some additional information about the characters and geography of this chapter. How are you, Mackelly?
I'm doing just fine. It was good to see you yesterday, even though once again you disappeared before I got to come over and chat.
The problem is in these public, I'm in such demand, you know. And plus,
know
when I
you
came
are.
over to your table, I got grilled as a manager for like what the heck was going on in the company. I'm like, all right, I'm going somewhere else.
I'm leaving. Yes, I know. And since we see each other so regularly, usually I let you chat with other folks. But I did think that, all right, I'm going to go find Simon. And then I looked and you were nowhere to be seen.
Well, I had soccer. That's why.
I thought you might have been up
Yeah,
there. I thought that's probably where you went.
That's exactly
How'd that go?
Well, it was the preseason scrimmage, so I'm not going to worry too much about it. But it's funny
Okay.
because I've picked a lot of the same players who didn't quite do what I wanted them to do last season. I think I've upgraded a little bit, but there's a lot of commonality. And we were exactly the same as last season. We were
Ah,
the better
go
team,
figure.
but profligate in front of goal and susceptible to breakaway goals at the other end. So we ended up getting a 3-3 tie, which is just not good enough.
No, not when you're the better team.
Exactly.
Well, I'm sure you'll get them whipped into shape here before too long.
I will. I started a couple of threads with individuals about what they can do to make our team successful.
I like it. The leadership,
Mhm.
clear
Exactly.
leader. You're like Stannis Baratheon of the of your soccer team.
In terms of my willingness to vary my tactics and plan, yes, I'm very much like Stannis. It's my way or the highway.
Right. Well, speaking of work, I noticed that our podcast life is rubbing off a bit into my work life. As most people know, we are writers, you and I, and we document things often with terms like this window, this screen, this
Right.
pane. And I noticed in my documentation, I mean, it's not like it was official documentation, but as I was writing it up, I spelled pane, P-A-Y-N-E, like Sir Illian was.
Very nice. That's good.
Like Sir Illian was going to walk across the screen.
Oh, that's great.
So, yeah, I thought, oh, goodness. How do you spell pain again if it doesn't have a Y in it? I forget.
I would have corrected that and got it wrong again because I would have once I've made the mistake, I would have then gone PAIN, forgetting what I was actually
Right,
aiming
yes.
for. You know.
Oh, yes. Another thing I noticed. This is not about. This has anything to do with our work. Has to do with our Discord community. I was on the GOH quotes channel.
That channel cracks me up.
It is very funny. It's almost worth becoming a member of the Discord community just for that channel alone. So, but I check it probably once a day or so at least, and I've noticed a trend. And I told you yesterday, I think it was, when we saw each other in person, that I noticed a trend that I'll tell you about right now.
Okay.
And,
I don't remember you saying that,
Yeah,
but I'm glad I haven't forgotten what the trend was.
So I noticed that most of these stories that people retell of the funny quote it goes like this. Simon says something funny. Mackelly's belly laugh.
Belly laugh.
It's basically like it's usually you doing something funny and me laughing about it. So I think I've determined that I'm the Ed McMahon to your Johnny Carson, which might be a reference that half of our population has no idea what I'm referring to.
Yes, I can see it though. I mean, definitely that does happen. I think I'm gonna sort of defend you because I think you're every bit as funny as I am. But two things. One, you have a better laugh. So your laughter makes my stories better. And secondly,
I've got a good laugh track laugh.
Right, exactly. Secondly, these people are writing out what they heard, what the funny story that they heard. Your stories are always 10 times as long as mine.
Long. It's the length. I've got to be more concise with my stories.
Exactly. People are like, oh, I'd write that one's really funny, but
I don't have that kind of time. The
one that cracked me up this week was the one where I said to you, well, actually, no, this wasn't attributed. It was written out, but not attributed. So it could have been either of us. But the quote was something along the lines of, that is an interesting point.
It was you.
Although, yeah, I know it was me. Although, between you saying it and me saying it was interesting, I've forgotten what it was.
I forgot what was interesting about it. Yes, but that made me laugh out loud.
Every time someone puts a quote in there, I don't remember it. I mean, like, every single time, I'm like, I gotta go listen to that. It sounds funny. You know?
Yeah, there was one in there today that I haven't looked up. There's something about you wearing women's underwear, and I did not remember that
one.
I
did remember. It was.
I'm sure you would.
Coincidentally, back to soccer at work. To sign up for soccer at work, there's a form, you fill it in, and it basically just like gets your level of attendance, the best level you ever played at, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then there's just a free form field for notes. And last season, one of the people signed up wrote in the free form notes, knowing that me and the other captains would all get a spreadsheet with every single one of these words. Said Simon wears women's underwear.
That's right. Oh, that's right. I do remember now. I just needed a reminder.
It's a guy you work with too.
Oh, is his hair cut similar to mine? Yes. Yeah. I think I know who you mean.
Yeah. Okay, so I think Robb is now fishing to get stories into the podcast.
Uh-oh, what's he done now?
Well, so last week's story about the car on the train tracks, that's thrilling stuff. That's definitely going in the podcast. He knew as he was telling me that was going in the podcast.
That's something you tell your grandkids about.
Right. This week, there is a visual that goes with this, and I should perhaps share that visual with you, which is he went to a bathroom in a bar from which he is yet to be banned. I
feel like there's a good future story coming when he gets banned from that bar.
Almost certainly. Well, wait for the rest of this story.
Okay.
And the bathroom was unisex, but it had a urinal or a urinal. But he took a photo of himself in the bathroom, standing next to this thing. The lowest point of the lip of the bowl of this urinal
Where's the story
was
going?
above his belly button.
What?
I mean, my brother's not a very tall fella, but there's no way. You'd have to be 6'6", 2 meters tall to even be able to use that. It was. I mean, I get when you're placing one of those on the wall, there's probably you could get it wrong by a couple of inches, but this is
get it wrong by a foot.
Exactly. I think it's absolutely miles away. But I'll get you the photo of that, and we can perhaps share it on the Discord server.
Yes,
it was
we
funny.
sure will.
I think we're slightly over time here, so why don't we get down to business?
Let's get down to another funny character in Stannis Baratheon.
who's having just fun and japes on Dragonstone. Yes, how did we leave Davos Seaworth? Last we saw of Davos, he was alone in a cell in the Dragonstone dungeons, being nursed back to health. He figured, because he was still sick from his long exposure in Blackwater Bay, right?
Right.
He figured they might be fattening him up, only to be burned alive. I mean, the fat is what would burn. I mean, that's good. It's good thinking, really.
Yes, true.
To be burned alive in the name of R'hllor. When Melisandre paid him a visit, it didn't look good. However, she primarily wanted to talk to him about the coming battle between R'hllor and the Great Other. Later, Davos got a cellmate in the form of former Hand of the King, Alester Florent. It seemed Alester sent a letter to the Lannisters offering terms for peace. If one of my team were to talk to one of the other captains, he'd be in a cell under Dragonstone too. Terms he did not get the okay from King Stannis. So, Mackelly, why don't we give him the summary of this one?
Okay. Well, Davos and Alester Florent receive visitors. It's Axel, Alester's brother, and the guard Davos nicknamed Lamprey. Seems Davos has been summoned by the king himself. The trio leave, and on Axel's orders, Lamprey takes the torch with him, leaving Alester in complete darkness.
Axel tells Davos that he'd burn him along with his brother if it were up to him. He's seen in the flames that Davos will betray King Stannis. He's also seen Stannis on the Iron Throne, but in order for that to happen, Stannis conveniently needs to make Axel his Hand of the King first, a task that Davos can help facilitate.
Feels a little self-serving, but okay.
Sounds it.
All Davos has to do is tell Stannis he supports Axel as his new Hand of the King. If Davos will do that, Axel will see that he gets a new ship when they sail from Dragonstone. If Davos refuses to cooperate, Axel suggests that an accident might befall him. After all, Axel is Castellan of Dragonstone and the garrison is his.
King Stannis awaits them in the chamber of the Painted Table. Davos is shocked at the physical change of his king since he last saw him at Storm's End. Stannis seems to have aged 10 years in the intervening time. Regardless, Stannis smiled ever so slightly when he saw Davos. The first thing the king asks him is what the punishment for treason is. Davos knows it's death, but knows that Stannis knows that just as well.
Davos gets the feeling he's being asked to condemn his cellmate Alester. Davos tries to defend Alester, but Stannis is not having it. The king compares himself to his brother Robert. Whereas Robert inspired loyalty, even from enemies, Stannis seems to only inspire betrayal, even from family.
Stannis has Axel tell Davos the plan that Axel and Salador's son have hatched to get Stannis and his men back on the winning path. It involves attacking Claw Isle, seat of House Celtigar. Lord Adrian Celtigar fought for Stannis at the Battle of the Blackwater, but bent the knee to Joffrey the moment he was captured. Attacking that lightly held castle will show the realm what happens to those who side with the Lannisters.
Stannis asks Davos his thoughts. Hesitantly, Davos offers that it's both folly and cowardice. After silencing the outraged Axel, Stannis asks Davos to back up his statement. Davos explains Lord Celtigar is old and done, so it's not surprising that he bent the knee. The residents of Claw Isle are the women and children of the men who died for Stannis on the Blackwater. Those men who survived the battle bent the knee because their lord did. What does it prove to kill their innocent families?
Stannis argues all men have a duty to their king above all else, to which Davos retorts, as you remained loyal to King Aerys when your brother raised his banners.
Oh.
A tense moment passes before Stannis admits it wasn't an easy choice to back Robert over his king. Stannis then admits he doesn't even really want the Iron Throne for personal reasons. It is his by right, and he has a duty to his daughter, brother, and to the realm.
Stannis wants to know why Davos tried to murder Melisandre. It's then Davos realizes Stannis did know that he was in the dungeons. Davos admits it's because she burned 4 of his sons on the Blackwater, and Stannis sets him straight. It wasn't her. It was the imp. Blame Stannis if he needs a target. He let his pride get in the way and sent her to Dragonstone. He tells Davos Melisandre saw Renly's death in the flames, but had no more part in it than Stannis did. And she told Stannis to send for Davos when Axel wanted him to burn.
Stannis then mentions that his nephew, Edric Storm, is sick, and Maester Pylos is leeching him. Stannis is sure the boy will be fine, but he's got king's blood flowing through his veins, and that's powerful. Stannis then agrees with Davos that Axel's war plan is poor. It gains Stannis nothing. He then commands that Davos get on his knees.
A confused Davos does as he's told. Stannis brandishes his sword that glows with fiery colors. However, when he touches Davos' shoulder, he feels no fire. For his good counsel and constant honesty, Stannis makes Davos his Hand of the King. He wants Davos by his side in the upcoming battle. Davos is confused. They don't have the force for another battle against the Lannisters.
Well, here we come. When Davos says as much, another voice responds. Melisandre has entered the chamber. It's the great battle the king refers to, between R'hllor and the Great Other. Seems Stannis has seen it himself in the flames. He saw men in black on a high hill in a forest and shapes moving in the snow.
Stannis and Melisandre have a plan involving leeches. However, Melisandre insists it's not the right way. She asks for the boy, and with him she'll wake the stone dragons. Stannis refuses. The boy is his own blood, bastard or not, and he's innocent of any wrongdoing.
Resigning herself to her king's wishes, Melisandre offers Stannis a dish with 3 large leeches. Stannis takes the first one, saying, "The usurper, Joffrey Baratheon," and throws the leech into the fire. He takes the second, "The usurper, Balong Greyjoy," into the fire. Finally, he takes the third, "The usurper, Robb Stark," and throws that one into the fire too.
We'll be right back.
Hello, friends. Are you ready to make some unforgettable memories? Well, if so, consider the Marriott Bonvoy program. Discover the perfect destination for your summer getaway and unlock exclusive deals on luxurious accommodations. With our affiliate partnership, you'll enjoy unbeatable savings and a seamless booking experience. Don't let summer slip away. Visit Marriott Bonvoy today and make this vacation season one for the books. Use our Ghosts of Harrenhal affiliate page to check it all out and buy Bonvoy points or give some as a gift. The link to our page is in the show notes. That's a problem for Robb and Kat and the rest of the Starks. Well, before we get started, I will say Axel Florent went quite hardcore on his brother here by taking the torch.
Can you imagine if you're in a dungeon with a relative stranger and your brother comes down the stairs with a torch to say that one of you is getting out of here and he takes the other guy? Be like...
and then the torch!
And the torch too.
Of course, it's only maybe a page or so later we see that Axel has designs on assuming Alester's role as Hand of the King.
Because Alester was Hand of the King, and now
yes.
You know what? I mean, there is a sort of like a sweeping, moving scene where Davos becomes the Hand of the King here, but Stannis has so few men. It's kind of like if it's not him, it's
right. Fat
Patches. Yeah, that rather undermines the honor, I feel.
That is true. There's not a lot of options, but
yeah.
Of course, when we get to it, we'll discuss what some of them were. But and Axel wants the job. He's going to push hard for it. In fact, he pushes so hard he almost pushes Davos off of the right. That's how hard he's going to push for the job.
If he had done that, that would have been rather unfortunate for his claim. Sorry, I pushed your friend off the thing. I'm Hand of the King. I felt like he might tell you the truth.
I've seen it in the flames. He was going to betray you. So, he claims that he sees the future in the flames, much like Melisandre does. And like we quickly mentioned in the summary, feels like he's seeing what he wants to see.
Isn't everyone? Doesn't Melisandre? Yes. Doesn't Stannis?
Yeah, I mean, but unlike Stannis later, he doesn't have the details to make it believable. Like, we know what happened on the Fist of the First Men, so we know, Stannis actually possibly did see something that really happened.
Mm-hmm.
Axel's version is that Stannis will sit the Iron Throne, and in order to do it, he must make me Hand of the King. That's a tough one to disprove, because you can't say what someone else did or didn't see, but it's incredibly self-serving.
Oh yeah, I mean, there isn't a lot more detail. I mean, if you saw Stannis sitting on the Iron Throne, there was a guy next to him with big ears and the Hand of the King badge on him, you'd be like,
hey, that's me.
That works out.
Right. I mean, if you did see that, how do you, how do you tell other people that without looking like you're incredibly self-serving? So, but it does remind me of Melisandre's line to Davos last chapter when she came to visit him in the dungeon, and she said, "The other's servants often hide black hearts in gaudy light."
That definitely sounds like it. An example.
She did go on to say that the Lord of Light gives priest's power to see through the falsehood. So I wonder if she has already deduced the fact that Axel Florent isn't who he claims to be necessarily.
I mean, look, you don't get to be Hand of the King without being, well, with the one exception of Davos Seaworth, you don't get to be Hand of the King without being quite ambitious,
Well,
and
yeah.
elbowing your rivals out of the way.
And I ultimately, I guess that's why Stannis says Davos is the best fit for Hand of the King, because you want the person that doesn't want the job for ambitious reasons.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it's Stannis is kind of funny about his relationship with Davos, because he often bridles at Davos's speaking truth to power, but at the same time he clearly values it, and
Right.
it makes it very difficult. I mean, Davos must constantly feel like he's on a tightrope.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
I gotta say this. He's gonna be mad, but
He's
I'm gonna
not
say
gonna
it
like
anyway.
it.
Yeah. So Axel sort of gives Davos the moral quandary of, if you say the right thing here, which is Axel would be a great Hand of the King, then I'll make sure you get through this. Whereas if you betray me in that room, when you talk to, then I'm going to make sure you never see the light of day again. And it makes what Davos does next even more noble.
It does, yes. And he has a moment of decision where he thinks a shove or a ship before he is honest about what he thinks of of Axel's plan. But
that's right. Because he offers him a ship, right? It's
right.
if once Axel is Hand of the King, Davos would have his own ship again in the Navy, which is obviously Davos likes to sail, so it would be
right. Yeah, and it goes a little bit to Alester. Not Alester. Axel, kind of playing loose with the whole. I am, a true believer in R'hllor, and I saw that you are going to betray Stannis in the flames. But if you're willing to vouch for me, I'll give you a ship, and we'll just forget all about what I saw in those flames.
You were either betraying him or you were right at the front of his fleet. One of those two.
It's one of those two, and depending on what you do is how I'm going to decide what I saw. Yeah, and he leads the whole thing off. Axel leads the whole thing off to Davos by saying, if it were up to me, I'd burn you along with my brother. Mm-hmm. So he kind of goes from, I'm going to burn you, I'll reward you, I'm going to kill you. So he covers all the bases.
And there is one other thing to think about here, is that, is he true to his word? I mean, once he's Hand of the King, he would have a lot of power, and he also probably has a sense of what Stannis and Davos' relationship is like. He might want him out of the picture.
Right. Yes. Because it's quite clear that Stannis really respects Davos' opinion. Yeah. Even if you're Axel Florent, you're picking up on that.
Right. But that's a good point, though, because even if you're Axel Florent, maybe as an Axel Florent, you don't even notice the Onion Knight, Davos Seaworth. So maybe he wouldn't see him as a rival. He elbows out of the way the other highborn rivals, but he might not even think to get rid of Stannis.
The lowly Onion Knight.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah. And we learn here in this chapter that Stannis was definitely a green in the Dance of the Dragons, because he's talking about traitors, and he mentions that I won't say exactly what he says, because
there is a huge spoiler for House of the Dragons.
Right, yes. So be careful reading this chapter if you don't know how House of the Dragon is going to end.
Luckily for me, I read it. I was like, oh, huge spoiler for House of the Dragons. Already forgotten.
Well, I won't tell you, but I will say that Stannis refers to Rhaenyra as trying to usurp her brother's throne. So clearly he stood on the side of the Greens and Aegon II.
Yeah. So if you remember Alester Florent, his proposal for which he now resides in the dungeon was to marry Shireen to Tommen Baratheon to basically build a bridge here back to the Lannisters. Davos saw what would happen if you made that plan Honestly, you'd end up in the dungeon if you suggested it to Stannis, but if you write to the Baratheons with it as his Hand of the King,
Yeah, that's the problem when you make someone the Hand of the King that doesn't really know you. You know,
right.
is Davos could have told him before the thought even came out of his mouth. No, that's going to end really badly. Don't do that. But
yeah, if you started the sentence with "I've had a thought, we could marry Cherie," you'd just be leaping in.
Right? Yes. No. Whoever you're going to say, it's not a good idea.
Whereas Axel would be like, "Let him speak. Let him speak."
Do you know who we could marry Tom and Baratheon to? No. So Stannis lists a bunch of family members who have betrayed him. And so I just thought we'd go down the list just kind of to remind everybody who they are and in what way they've betrayed Stannis. The first one is obviously his brother Renly. We know how he betrayed him. He tried to take his throne, which is a pretty big betrayal from your younger brother. He mentions his grandfather, which is when you start getting in to the Estermont's family tree, it gets really confusing because there is a lot of conflicting information in the various parts in the book. So either Eldon Estermont is Cassana is Stannis' mother.
Mother, yeah.
Yes. So Eldon Estermont is either Cassana's father or brother, depending on what reference in the book you are referring to.
So in one of those scenarios, he would be his grandfather.
Yes, and in multiple times in this chapter, he refers to his grandfather. So, regardless of whether, which reference you're referring to here, which reference you go with, the uncle or the brother, or uncle or the grandfather, he sided with Renly at first, and then came to Stannis when Renly died, and then he bent the knee to Joffrey after the Battle of the Blackwater.
Right. So that's Eldon Estermont, whoever he might be.
Right. Oh, in this chapter, it's back to being his grandfather.
Grandfather, right. It feels like he's definitely talking. Yeah. So cousins have also betrayed him. Aemon, son of Eldon Estermont, so that could be his uncle.
Right.
In this chapter, it's his uncle.
Yes, in this chapter, it's his uncle. Yes.
Aemon's son, Alan, who would therefore be a cousin.
Yes, he's definitely a cousin, whether it's first or second.
Right, yeah. They've also bent the knee to Joffrey.
Right. And then he's got another cousin, Andrew, who he mentions later in the chapter that still supports Stannis. He's a former squire to Stannis, and he's the son of Lomas, who is, we're pretty sure, his brother to Cassana.
Okay. And therefore, Andrew is a first cousin, right?
Andrew's a first cousin, yes. Lomas would be Stannis' uncle.
We'll be right back.
This episode is sponsored by Audible. To get a free audiobook, or 2 if you're an Amazon Prime member, go to our exclusive URL, audibletrial.com/ghostsharrenhal. You can find the link in our show notes.
And then his uncle-in-law, Alester Florent.
Right. Yeah. He was saying all this because he was comparing himself to Robert, saying Robert could turn enemies into allies, and I've got family members that are betraying me.
Yeah. He talks about 2 people that Robert captured during the rebellion, who Stannis would have put to death, and Robert went out hunting with them and partying with them, so
axe throwing with them.
Yeah. They were armed with axes while Robert was in their presence. Yeah. But right. I mean, hey, that's how you build consensus, You don't you bury the hatchet, you don't bear the grudges.
You bury the hatchet in wood, like 20 feet away.
Exactly. So Davos poo-poos the plan to attack Claw Isle, and it's clear that Stannis already thought that. He already thought that this would be a an empty victory.
Right.
You take your pitiful force and you attack poorly defended lands and you win. That hardly reestablishes your claim to the Iron Throne. And actually, Stannis maybe didn't think of this, but Davos is right. The reason it's undefended is because those people went to fight for Stannis,
Right. Yeah. 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 I think it's pretty clear that he was just running this plan past Davos kind of as a test before making him Hand of the King. Does your opinion of this plan align with what I'm thinking?
Right.
Even though there were moments when Stannis was playing devil's advocate and was kind of supporting Axel's plan, I think ultimately he knew it was a bad plan. He later says it was a bad plan.
Do you think that he was aware of what Axel Florent would do between the dungeon and the audience with Stannis?
What do I think Stannis knew?
Mm-hmm.
I don't. No, I don't think he.
But then what kind of test is it for Davos? It's not much of a test for Davos for Stannis to say, is this a good plan?
Well, I think he wanted to see if his philosophies aligned with Stannis's philosophies.
Yeah. I think Stannis figured out what Axel Florent would do on that walk, that he would tell Davos, take my side in this room and I'll be good to you. Fail to and I'll kill you. And so Stannis...
Okay. So you think the test was, will you still be honest with me having that carrot dangled in front of you?
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
exactly. Because I think he probably knew what Davos would think of the plan, because they do think the same way.
See, that's what I love about this show. I came into this episode thinking one way, and you were thinking a different way, and now I see things in a different light. Yeah, it's a very different test than the test I was thinking of.
And it's the kind of test that would be more important to Stannis. It's a true test of loyalty. Your life hangs in the balance here. Will you still do what's right for me, or will you do what's right for you?
Yeah, yeah. The other test is important too because he just had a Hand of the King that very much philosophically didn't align with him.
Yeah.
But yeah, I had not thought about it that way. So yeah, good job. I like it.
Yeah. So Axel's plan really doesn't have much merit by itself. I mean, it would be a small victory, and they could do with a morale boost, but honestly, go killing defenseless fishing villages. It's just murderous. And I think even the fighting men who want a victory would feel a little bit sick about that.
Oh, I would think so. Yeah, maybe Salladhor Sand's people would less because, I mean, the first question is, well, why would Salladhor Sand help come up with this plan? And I think the correct answer is Stannis's thought that Sand is up for it because of the plunder, because Stannis owes Salladhor a ton of money.
Right.
And so this is one way to help him pay off some of his debt, I guess. Because it certainly doesn't seem like Salladhor is all that invested in showing Westeros what happens if you cross Stannis Baratheon. He's like, "Oh, I got a great idea."
Yeah. But the lesson that most people in the Seven Kingdoms would get from this invasion of Claw Isle would be, look what happens if you side with Stannis Baratheon.
Right. Yeah, you could look at it that way too.
The people who fought against Stannis Baratheon are all doing just fine, but those who fought for him are now being slaughtered by him.
Yeah, right. It's not a good look in lots of ways, and it's also morally very.
Yeah.
Yes. But I will say, Salladhor Sand's fleet is the primary fleet that Stannis has now, so he does need to find some way to start paying him the money that he owes him, or do something to keep him engaged in this.
Well, if you're going to keep him, I mean, the path is to win the Iron Throne. If you win the Iron Throne, you can pay your debts.
Well, there's that. Yeah. And at first thought, when I first read this section, I thought Stannis has to be kind of careful with Axel here because, as Axel pointed out, he's been the Castellan of Dragonstone for a long time. Yeah. And as Stannis also mentions that more than half of the men on the island are Florents. So if Axel and the Florents chose to change sides, they could possibly end Stannis' reign rather quickly. But then the more I thought about it, I remembered the fact that the Florents are pretty well hitched to Stannis right now, because they didn't back their own liege lord, the Tyrells. Well, they did originally, but then they came over when Renly died. And we know that the Lannisters and the Tyrells have already given Brightwater Keep to Garland Tyrell. So the Florents don't even have their own castle at the moment.
Yeah.
So my point there is them,
they're not likely to abandon the cause just because of the slight of losing the hand of the king.
Right, because they've made a bed that they kind of have to lie in right now.
Yeah. So we get a new perspective a little bit on Robert's rebellion, that Stannis at least considered not siding with Robert. I wonder about that, though, because he's saying that, betraying a king is treason, no matter what. And clearly they did betray King Aerys. But he made it out like it was a moral quandary for him. I don't know if it was. I don't know if it was really. I mean,
I think
it's a moral quandary if your brother rebels against a king who you do respect. But nobody could have respected Aerys by the end. So for Stannis to make the dishonorable decision that he did, it must have been pretty clear cut. He must have had some qualms about it because of the dishonor, but it must have been fairly clear cut for him, I think.
Right. I think the difficulty would have come in the shape of how much Stannis believes in honor and loyalty. And is it his brother that he's going to be loyal to, or his king, his liege, that he will remain loyal to? So I guess that's where the challenge came in.
Yeah. My feeling is that everybody should adopt the Varys approach. The loyalty should be to the realm. If the person who runs things is not doing what's best for the realm, then that should be the end of your loyalty to that person.
Yeah, sure. That's a solid position to take.
Yeah.
But then he expounds on the whole thing by saying that he doesn't even want the Iron Throne, and he can't understand why his brothers wanted it so badly. And, he says that he's honor bound. He feels a duty and an honor, but he doesn't outright say, I don't want it. He just says, I don't know why my brothers wanted it so bad in the first place. And then he says to Davos, it's not a matter of want. It's a matter of, I am the king. But I thought that was pretty deep insight into Stannis' mind, that he's not necessarily doing this for personal vanity, but to continue a legacy for his family, even for Robert, who he says he admits didn't really care for him much.
I'll take a slightly different position. I agree with you to a certain extent, but I also think there's a degree of legacy building here by Stannis. He wants people to believe that he didn't want this. I didn't want this. It was thrust upon me.
Oh, I see. Right.
But he wants it. He wants it bad enough to fight and lose 10,000 men and then start to plan the next fight again.
Right.
He wants it.
Yeah, you could certainly make that argument.
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure that Robert wanted the Iron Throne when he started the rebellion. I mean, the initial cause was to have Lyanna Stark returned and to pay Rhaegar back for kidnapping her. And then, then it became payback for the murder of the Starks. It didn't start out as, I want the Iron Throne. It was started out as smaller than that.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of things sort of spiral towards the end, because obviously it could have all been done in single combat between Robert and Rhaegar.
Right.
I mean, that was kind of the whole fulcrum of this. But you're right. When Aerys killed the Starks, then that kind of brought him into maybe a second single combat was required between Aerys and Ned Stark.
Right. Aerys would have probably used a champion, but yes.
I think so. But then with Jaime killing Aerys and then the Lannisters just killing the children, suddenly they created that power vacuum. And then there's quite a few sort of like people who, with hindsight, might have grabbed the throne. Jaime might have grabbed the throne. Ned had a golden opportunity to grab the throne. But I think neither of them,
on it.
Right, neither of them really wanted it.
Yes, I agree.
Which,
I agree.
Which kind of left Robert as the only one left, really.
Yeah, and I think way back in early in the Game of Thrones, Robert asked Ned, maybe I'm getting a bit of the TV show mixed in here, but Robert asked Ned, why didn't you take the throne? And Ned said you had the better claim because Robert's grandmother was a Targaryen.
Targaryen, yeah.
But
just throwing
was
this
that
out,
book or was that?
No, well, that was definitely said. That was definitely said. I can't tell you one way or the other, but it's also true, right? His grandmother was a Targaryen, so
right.
Just throwing one other name out. I wonder if Jon Arryn would have been an interesting choice.
Oh, sure.
Difficult because he didn't have an heir at the time, right?
Yeah.
So it could have led
because Robin is too small to have
been born then. Yeah. So that could have been a real problem if Jon Arryn had been the pick, but he might have been a consensus pick that everyone could have rallied around.
Yeah. That could have worked. But
we are off topic.
We are slightly off topic. But part of the reason Stannis feels honor and duty bound to win the Iron Throne is that he wants to pay retribution to the corrupt small council of the king, starting with Cersei and her kids. And of course, the kids weren't part of the small council, but he has a quote that Cersei made him, referring to Robert, look like a fool with the kids pretending that they were his, and that she might have murdered him as she did Jon Arryn and Ned Stark. And
I think she probably did have something to do with Robert's murder.
Right. She provided the strong wine to Lancel, who provided it to Robert.
Yeah. Robert killed himself.
Yes.
But
going into
she
a
definitely
boar hunt
wasn't
drunk.
Yeah, she wasn't trying to stop it. Ned, she's culpable, but she certainly didn't want to kill him.
Right. She thought, if I remember correctly, she thought he was going to take the black.
Right. And Jon Arryn, she has consistently not admitted to that, one admitting to far worse crimes.
Yes, exactly. Now, Grand Maester Pycelle did tell Tyrion that he thought Cersei wanted Jon Arryn dead before Jon Arryn acted on the discovery of the incest. So he took over care from Maester Coleman and made sure that Jon Arryn didn't recover. But we still don't know who or what was the initial cause of the illness.
Right.
But you're right. Cersei's been had plenty of opportunity to confess and has not yet. So
yeah. Stannis also mentions that Barristan Selmy said that the rot in Aerys' reign began with Varys, which is interesting. Because again, I was just bigging up Varys as the one person who claims his loyalty is to the realm, not to an individual, which seems to me to be an honourable position to hold. And that also might mean that when Aerys went bad, Varys started to plot against him.
Right.
And so, in some ways, he would be a destabilizing factor against a rotten king. But that doesn't mean he's a problem. All you have to do is be a good king and he'll be a good servant,
Yeah. So, we saw Varys plotting with Illyrio Mopatis about a royal upheaval under Robert, where they seem to be planning to put a Targaryen, and we assume it's Viserys, on the throne. Here, Selmy is suggesting that the Targaryen downfall began with Varys' whispers. So, could we have misunderstood what Varys and Illyrio's plans were, and it wasn't Viserys and Dany they wanted back on the throne? Because why sabotage Aerys only to later put his terrible son, Viserys, back on the throne?
Well, that's true. That's true.
Or maybe it's just a coincidence that Aerys went mad around the time that Varys arrived on the scene, and Barristan is incorrect. That there was a correlation.
Yeah. It's interesting to remember that conversation was had prior to Viserys' demise, because I'm kind of seeing it as Varys was happy to get rid of Aerys, was okay with Robert, but could kind of see that Robert was not long for this world for the way he was acting and living his life,
Right.
and did not want Joffrey. So maybe was planning for a succession that did not involve Joffrey, and Viserys might have been a possibility. But of course, that's the problem with that is that Viserys was every bit as bad as Joffrey.
Yes.
So,
but
Varys wouldn't necessarily know that, but Illyrio Mopatis would.
Right. True. Yes, because he's been around him a lot more.
Yeah.
I will say that in the future, we're going to hear a slightly different version of how Varys ended up as Aerys' Master of Whisperers.
Okay.
And how Aerys' paranoia time frame fits into all that. You know, the whole chicken and egg thing here. So we'll get another perspective.
Yeah. And then the next person that Stannis has it in for is Jaime. He thinks he should have been killed or sent to the wall for what he did. And that is, I mean, that is essence of Stannis right there.
It is essence of Stannis. And I will.
There's no room for flexibility and justice. It is absolute, always, every time.
I will say that again, Stannis likely doesn't know the full story, and we've got a Jaime chapter coming up next week where we'll get more details. That if Stannis had gotten these details, maybe would have swayed his opinion a little bit. Simon's
might
shaking
sway
his head.
yours. It might sway yours, Mackelly Ray, but it ain't swaying Stannis Baratheon's. He's just he just doesn't. The plight of every citizen of King's Landing is nothing to Stannis Baratheon compared to honor and
loyalty,
fulfilling your vows and loyalty. Exactly.
Yeah, you can make that argument.
That's how he seems. I'm just basing it on the way he acts. I promise. It's not a prejudice.
I'm finding Stannis to be so much more complicated and intricate in this read through as I did dive so deep into each chapter.
Well, that is true. I mean, we talk about Stannis the way that everybody talks about Stannis, but the reality is we keep seeing him doing things that are not Stannis-like.
Right. How often do we say something like that?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, he brought up the one that I've almost completely forgotten and missed all along, that he totally sided with Robert in the rebellion.
Right. Yeah.
He could completely afford against him. He would have expected Renly to fight against him.
Right. Yeah.
He holds Renly to a higher calling.
So we learned that Melisandre advised Stannis to summon Davos. And that was shocking to Davos.
He was in the dungeon for trying to kill her.
Yes, right. And back in those dungeons, when they had their conversation, he spoke truthfully, even when it wasn't what she wanted to hear. And, you know, you add that to seeing what we don't know whether she can or not, but if she's seeing through Axel's, you know, what was the term she used? Gaudy light, seeing through the gaudy light to a dark heart, then you get what you have here, you know, where she's like, no, that's the guy you want right there, that Davos Seaworth.
And actually, if you think about it, that goes to the test we were talking about. She also tested him in kind of the same way, and he stuck to the truth, didn't say the thing to help himself, spoke the hard truth, and the test did the same thing today. So Davos keeps on proving himself to be truly loyal.
Yeah, and one thing she said to him down in that dungeon was that you doubt the truth of her lore, but you serve him all the same and will serve him again. And I wonder if that serve him again was a little foreshadowing to him becoming Hand of the King, that she had decided.
Yeah. Sorry. Finish the
No,
sentence.
she had decided to advocate for Davos to Stannis.
I thought it had a double meaning, though. I thought it meant when I set you on fire, you'll be serving
Oh,
him.
but Davos might have been thinking the same thing at that
Right.
time.
She was perfectly fine with him hearing that, yeah.
Yeah.
And also that Melisandre advised Stannis to give Renly one final chance to relent Stannis' claim. That Stannis was ready to go to war with Renly, but Melisandre was the one who asked for a final parley to see if they could come up with something. So that's interesting. It shows that because she's such a sort of religious fanatic, you kind of see her as being in the same way that Stannis is seen as a sort of monolith. You see her as monolithic as well, but in actual fact, she was trying to find alternative solutions to the problems.
Yeah. I found that whole section there when they were talking about Melisandre and Renly to be a bit confusing and unclear, because Stannis says to Davos, "She's no more to blame for Renly's death than I am. She was with me the whole time." But then he says she would have spared Renly's life if she could have. So at first it sounds like Stannis wasn't aware that it was Melisandre that, sent the shadow assassin to kill Renly. But then he says she would have spared Renly's life if she could have. So then it sounds like he does know that she did that.
I wonder if the first part of that is just sort of like the sort of like court of law alibi.
Right.
He and I were both outside the walls of Storm's End. We had nothing to do with his death, but he brought it on himself, and she was the medium by which he died.
Yeah, it seems awfully unlikely that Stannis wouldn't have known about her role in Renly's death. I wondered if his statement of she is no more to blame for Renly's death than I am was, I signed off on it.
Oh, rather than absolving them both, he's
Yes.
actually implicating them both. He's saying,
Right.
yeah.
But it's the whole the few sentences where he says she was with me the whole time. You can ask your son Davos if you don't believe me. He was there too. Doesn't
Devon.
fit. Devon doesn't really fit with the other sentences around those.
Yeah.
So the whole thing seemed a bit confusing to me.
Yeah. So Edric Storm is in town. If you remember that that was the reason for the second Shadow Demon, was to get Edric Storm from Storm's End. Edric Storm, as
Right.
we remember, is Robert's second oldest bastard, I believe, behind Maya.
Yeah, Maya's the oldest. I think Gendry might be older. He seems older anyway. Edric
Okay.
seems like a maybe not past his tween years yet.
Okay, I see. But Edric is under the weather and he's being leeched. But then, given what happens at the end of the chapter, I think maybe he's perfectly healthy. They just wanted some blood.
Yeah.
But they also talk about how charming Edric is and how he's befriended. He was beloved at Storm's End, and in fact, Stannis mentions the fact that Courtney Penrose gave his life to protect this kid because he loved this kid.
And who does that sound like to you?
It doesn't sound like Stannis Baratheon.
No, it doesn't, but it does sound an awful lot like Edric's father.
Robert
Who
Baratheon,
is
exactly.
really
Yes.
good at
Yeah.
charming people and getting them to fall in line with his way of thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah, certainly him being sick could be related to what Melisandre alludes to at the end of the chapter, wanting the boy. And it doesn't sound like for any good positive purposes for Edric, anyway.
Yeah, it sounds like, I mean, just to jump ahead a little bit, it sounds like there's a conflict between Melisandre and Stannis over Edric. She wants to put him to death because she thinks she can do significant magic by causing his death.
Right.
But as a sort of compromise, they've said if we can get some blood from him, we can do some lesser magic with it. And the lesser magic appears to be some curse against the three usurping kings.
Yeah, that's certainly what it seems like.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like Melisandre wants Edric for an ice cream social. It seems like she's got some nefarious plans for the boy.
But you know what? If you got to say, if something bad happens to the three kings who get named, then then she's got a case. Right. Imagine what I could do if I lop his head off.
If you give me the whole body worth of blood.
But it's interesting. Stannis again. Sort of like he could do the Stannis-like thing and say, he's just my bastard nephew. I don't care. Put him to death. But he's protecting him and trying to find a lesser solution to achieve the end, which he thinks is the best thing for the realm, him on the throne.
Right.
And he's giving up that opportunity for the kid.
Because so he's an innocent boy and he is his nephew. So yeah, there are serious complexities to Stannis when you start to really dive into his character.
Yeah. Maybe he's just as charming as Edric.
I'm not sure that's one of the complexities. That's not one of the levels of the onion there. And we just had a discussion about Stannis' flaming sword right in the middle of our summary.
Presumably we edit out because it was I was reading the book to try and sort this out.
So I read it, in my mind, I thought that Stannis had a flaming sword, much like Beric Dondarrion. But then Simon read it to me, and he's right. It glows. It doesn't necessarily say it's flaming. It glows with flame-like colors, but it doesn't mention that it's a flaming sword.
Or fall.
Yes, fall colors. That works too. Yeah, obviously Beric Dondarrion's sword, the flames were real. It burned
for sure.
The Hound. And this, when Stannis touches Davos' shoulder, it doesn't feel like anything but a regular old sword.
Yeah. So this made, but anyway, this made Davos the new Hand of the King, and we pretty confident he's going to be honourable and do right by Stannis, and not overstep the mark. He may overstep the mark, but he'll do it doing things that Stannis would want, because he knows his mind.
Yes, that is a huge plus here compared to Alester. And Stannis names Davos Lord of Rainwood. And so Rainwood is the forest that makes up much of Cape Wrath, which is the peninsula in the Stormlands where Davos's keep is. But I will say it's unclear if the title grants him any, liege lordship, if he has any vassals that report to him, because there's others like the House Cairn of Nightsong. They have their self-styled title is Lord of the Marches, but that doesn't hold any real power over any of the other lords.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. As we were saying, there is the candidates for Hand of the King were rather thin on the ground, and Stannis himself makes this point about why the alternatives are worse. So Durham Bar Emmon is one. He calls him that boy, and he's the 15-year-old Lord of Sharp Point. If I was Stannis Baratheon, I wouldn't want a 15-year-old as my Hand of the King.
No, that's probably not a good
idea. I wouldn't
idea.
trust a 15-year-old to drive a car,
Yeah, in fact, the government of our state doesn't either. So that works out well.
Yes, I'm entirely in agreement. His faithless grandfather, who's already bent the knee to the other side, so he wouldn't be much use.
Or his uncle, depending on where you are in the story.
Right, yes.
Yeah. Adrian Celtigar, he comes up, and of course, he's already bent the knee to Joffrey after the Battle of Blackwater, just like Stannis' uncle did. And then he mentions the new Valyrian is 6 years old. That's Montrese Valerian. He became Lord Valerian when his father died on the Blackwater.
And the new Sunglass sailed for Volantis after I burned his brother. So Gunsa Sunglass was the brother who got burned, who told Stannis after Melisandre burned the statues of Seven that he couldn't support Stannis any longer. So he was thrown in a cell, and then Melisandre burned him alive in Davos 3. So his brother, not entirely incomprehensibly, has fled to Volantis to avoid.
Right. Put a lot of water between you and
Exactly.
Dragonstone.
Yeah.
But, it sure... So, I mean, just to wrap that up, Davos seems like a pretty good option compared to that lot there.
He did, compared to good people.
Right. Yes. It's just Davos's constant putting himself down. He just can't believe that he is as worthy as he is.
The only real challenger is Axel Florent, really, who's got the sort of like the gravitas and power to make a good hand of the king. But this whole incident proves that he's more interested in power grab than in serving Stannis. So,
Right. But it sure seems like Stannis saw the battle between the Night's Watch and the others in whites on the Fist of the First Men in those flames.
he truly did. I do question whether that would change my mind as Stannis Baratheon to my path. I mean, his path to this point has been to try to win the Iron Throne. That vision appears to have given him a different sort of raison d'etre, and I wonder that it would do that because it's too incomprehensible. I mean,
Right.
There's something very scary in the snowy lands.
Yeah, if we didn't already know the event,
Yeah.
like we know because we were
Right.
there with
Yeah.
Sam, but Stannis was not. So, but he's also got Melisandre saying, the real battle is against the great other.
Yeah, that's
not...
true. That's true.
So he's got her in that that capacity.
And she probably could interpret the vision for him. Like, that's what's happening. You see those guys? Those are what we mean when we say the great other.
Yeah, and it certainly
they're coming for
confirms
us.
that the others are related to the great other, if not the physical manifestation of the great other.
Yeah.
So
Melisandre makes it sound like Armageddon. She described it as man's hour on Earth is almost done, which suggests that it's not just Westeros, that this could be the whole world.
Right. It certainly comes across that way.
Yeah.
Now, I wonder if seeing the Night's Watch fighting the others, if it might cause Stannis to turn his attention to aiding the Night's Watch. We know that Pycelle told us that Bowen Marsh sent a letter to all the kings. So you would think Stannis has gotten a letter about, their need for help. But in this sense, I think Melisandre and the battle between R'hllor and the Great Other would probably be enough to cause him to commit to helping the Night's Watch if he's ever even thinking about doing that.
Yeah. So the reason Melisandre wanted to kill Edric was so that she could, and I'm going to put air quotes here, wake the stone dragon. And in the last Davos chapter, Melisandre told how Azor Ahai would be born again amidst smoke and salt to wake dragons out of stone. So is Edric Storm the Azor Ahai? No. Presumably, Melisandre is trying to fulfill some kind of prophecy here, and she believes that Stannis could be Azor Ahai.
Yeah. We discussed last time around that there's someone else that fits that description pretty well, and that will be Daenerys Targaryen.
Mm-hmm.
We discussed that she was born on Dragonstone, and that she woke stone dragons out of those stone dragon eggs that she was given. So
yeah,
but he doesn't get Edric, or she doesn't get Edric. Instead, she has to deal with these 3 leeches, and he uses them for the 3 kings that he would like to rid himself of.
Yeah, and it's kind of sad in some ways that it's. I mean, obviously Stannis is Stannis, so it's the 3 kings, but he has worse enemies than 2 of the 3 people he names.
Tywin, I mean,
Tywin, exactly. Yes.
Right. You take out Tywin, and the whole Lannister House of Cards falls.
Yeah.
But it certainly ends our hopes for a Robb Stark, Stannis Baratheon put their differences aside for the greater good alliance.
Presumably she could throw another leech on the fire and say, undo that one.
An undo leech.
Yeah.
But he did, in his defense, he did tell Cat, no, I consider your son Robb to be as much of a traitor as the others. So I just find it certainly seems, and I think he alluded to this previously, that Stannis doesn't feel he owes Ned anything. Yet Ned risked and lost his life to get the message to Stannis about Stannis's right to the Iron Throne. So, you know.
But then that goes to his, I don't want this, I am this, you know. Anyone who does something to help me gain the Iron Throne is simply fulfilling their duty. There's no nobleness to it. It's simply what you were supposed to do. So
right, that's true. I think there's also still some sour grapes there about Robert picking Ned over Stannis to be his Hand of the King after Jon Arryn died.
Yeah, I think a lot of Stannisness masks sort of like bitter feelings towards individuals. Right. Do you have some background for us?
This chapter had a lot of background options.
Even as I read it, I was like, it's a bumper.
It really is.
What will he choose?
So, yeah, I had a lot to go with. But again, I have to be sparing with my background so that we don't run out. So, Stannis references his brother Robert winning 3 battles in a single day at Summerhall. That's obviously in reference to Robert's rebellion, because when Robert, Ned, and Jon Arryn declared their open rebellion against Mad King Aerys, not all of their bannermen were quick to fall in line behind them. 3 of such were the Stormlords Fell, Catherine, and Grandison, who opted to back the king. Their plan was to meet at Summerhall, join forces, and march on Storm's End. Robert Baratheon had just returned to Storm's End after squashing Targaryen loyalist forces at Gulltown in the Vale. Unfortunately for Robert's 3 wayward lords and their forces, the young Lord of Storm's End got wind of their plan. Robert and his forces got to Summerhall before the 3 factions could unite and took them out one by one. Lord Fell was killed, and as Stannis told us, Catherine and Grandison were captured and eventually turned to Robert's side.
Well, thank you.
Certainly.
Watching the television show, we saw a bit more of Davos in the dungeon, but he gets visited there by Princess Shireen, which is kind of interesting. Who while he's stuck there, she starts to teach him how to read.
Which is a gripe he has about being Hand of the King, is he can't read or write.
So in the TV show, they started to address that. Alester Florent is dropped and Edric Storm is dropped. Neither of them feature. The moral quandary of should I say what I think will set me free or should I speak the truth is changed into that was about Claw Island. It's changed into Stannis announcing that they're going to kill a bastard son of Robert Baratheon for the magic that it would bring. Now, it's not Edric Storm because he was dropped entirely from the TV show. It's somebody else, but I think it's a little bit of a spoiler to mention who it is, so I'm not going to.
Okay.
They have a bastard son of Robert Baratheon, and they're going to kill him.
It's Jon Snow, isn't it?
Wait a minute. No, I don't think so.
No, I don't think so either.
But Davos does what Davos would do. He says, don't kill that innocent child, and so instead they do the 3 leeches, and then the 3 leeches have the same end game.
Okay. The leeches aren't spared the fate.
No, they got it. They bought it, the leeches. But they died with a full stomach, you know.
Right, yeah.
Pedantry, apart from I shared some confusion with you over some of the things he was saying, but they were very much character decisions and very much felt like he was intentionally saying things that were slightly ambiguous. So you can't really call it pedantry without raising the ire of certain people.
Right. Yes. We definitely don't want to do that.
Yeah. So news and notes.
So George Martin was recently interviewed by GBC News, which is a Gibraltarian public broadcast service. I didn't know it existed, but it was a follow-up to his blog post about how the Rock of Gibraltar inspired Casterly Rock. I watched it today. It's about 10 minutes long, and he talks about some of his experiences when visiting the Rock of Gibraltar, along with his experience visiting Hadrian, which did we decide? Hadrian's Wall, which, is something else we've talked about not that long ago. I posted it on our Facebook page, on Twitter, and our Discord community, so you can check that video out in any of those locations.
Remember Hadrian, when we mentioned him before, I was saying that he has a gate named after him in Athens and a wall named after him in between England and Scotland. It's like that guy had some scope.
Yeah, maybe Martin used Hadrian's gate as his inspiration for the Bloody Gate.
I don't know where it was in Roman times, but right now it's just in the middle of a park. I mean, like you can walk around it or through it. It stops nothing.
It's not very similar to the Bloody Gate in any way.
Okay, so for people who are listening up to date, this week we have our live video chat with our sustainers. It'll be at 7 p.m. on Tuesday. We hope as many of you as possible can come. We always enjoy hanging out with you guys.
That we do. It's a lot of fun. And if you're listening in the future, well,
you missed it.
You missed it.
And we just a shout out to our Lord Paramount member Vanessa, who for two reasons. One is that she has taken on the unenviable task of collating and databasing all of Mackelly's background so that we can keep a track of what we've done and what we can do in the future. So
incredibly helpful.
That is yeoman's work, and we're really thankful to Vanessa for it. And also, we know that she's got illness in her family, and so we give her our very best wishes.
Absolutely.
So let's conclude. So yeah, as you've been saying, Stannis is sort of two-dimensional at best, but there's more to him once you start to really think about what he's doing. He seems like he's quite smart. He is more flexible than he lets on. And also he seems to be driven to do the right thing. He's seen this vision in the flames, and he's not abandoning his claim to the Iron Throne. He is the king of the Seven Kingdoms,
right?
But delaying it in favor of trying to help the greater good.
Yeah, possibly. It seems like that's what Melisandre was getting at there. Yeah. On first read through, you might just think of Stannis as a rigid, just man. But on subsequent read-throughs, and especially as I've read the chapters so many times in a week for this particular read-through, I begin to pick up on the complexities that make him so fascinating. Yeah, he's definitely a rigid, just man, for sure. Mm-hmm. But he's also caring and at times surprisingly reasonable. And we saw his loyalty to his family, to his brother Robert and Edric. And he's very self-reflecting. He asked Melisandre, why would the great other choose me? My brother Robert was a much better choice. Why would he even bother to choose me? And he takes criticism. That's one thing you could certainly say about him. Yeah. As long as it's honest criticism, he's willing to listen. And he's actually quite forward-thinking for someone of Westeros. He mentions that Shireen is his heir. Yeah. Not that I need to find an heir, but that Shireen is his heir. And, he even has a bit of a dry sense of humor at times.
Go on.
So, well, he makes some, like he tells Davos, he tells him to get on his knees, and Davos is kind of hemming and hawing, and he, in my mind anyway, he kind of jokingly said, do it, your lord commands you. Your king commands you.
Okay.
I think he has a little bit of a sense of humor that you wouldn't expect.
So what you're saying is, when he says the absolutely rigid, rock solid Stannis Baratheon things, if you read it enough times, you might start to think he's being funny.
Yes. Okay. That's a good way of putting it. Sure.
Not great news for Robb Stark being lumped in with those other two kings. Honestly, I'm okay if those curses, which clearly they were, work just fine on Balong Greyjoy and Joffrey Baratheon. But don't be doing anything bad to Robb Stark, please.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
Yeah.
The Starks have had enough pain and suffering since Ned rode south with King Robert.
Again, you mentioned last week that the timelines are sometimes a bit off. Maybe this was before Rickard Karstark's betrayal.
Oh, and that was the thing.
That was the thing.
The thing for Robb. Oh,
And
oh
maybe
yeah, yeah.
maybe before he foolishly married the wrong girl.
Yeah, and his grandfather died.
And his grandfather died. Yeah, it's been going. I mean, it's all going horribly wrong for him. So maybe
His
this has just
sister
already
was
happened.
married
Yeah.
to their arch enemy.
Balon and Joffrey are having the time of their lives. They want to watch their backs.
Yeah, really. But so Melisandre says regarding the fight at the Fist, Davos asks, what does that mean? And she says the war has begun, is what it means. So does that mean the first step in the war is helping the Night's Watch? That we'll have to keep an eye on that. I mean, it would be quite an about face for Stannis to give up on taking the Iron Throne, like he's been 100% committed to doing. He saw something in the flames, and now he's going to head north,
right,
to help the Night's Watch fight the others. But at the same time, I think what he saw in the flames shook him enough, and he's got Melisandre on his shoulder saying, that's where we need to be. That's the real battle.
She needs to look over Axel Florent's shoulder when he's looking into the flames as well. So she can roll her eyes when he says,
"You're right." Oh, is that what you see?
Yeah. That just looked like flames to me. Melisandre said that the leeches will and won't work. So she thinks these curses will work, but maybe they won't work. But the thing is, I think the more we think about this, the more obvious that ambiguity is. The curses are going to work. Whatever the curse is, she thinks it's going to work. What won't work is that it's not going to wake the stone dragon. Which is the point of bringing Edric Storm there for his blood. And so,
right. Yeah, sure. So if it doesn't do what they need, if the leeches don't do what they need it to do we need to fear for Edric?
Well, yeah, but the flip side is if the leeches do what they might do, if all three of those characters are killed off, do we need to fear for Edric?
Right. Yeah, because then it shows that it
Yeah.
it did do something.
See what I did with
now,
a leechful? Imagine what I could do with a legful.
Right. And they have an argument, Melisandre and Stannis, that one innocent boy against all the boys and girls and people of Westeros. So clearly they find this blood to be what they're trying to accomplish to be very important. So whether it does or doesn't work, we still might need to worry about Edric.
So one question.
Actually, one thing that Davos notices is that Stannis doesn't use Edric's name, and that makes Davos very nervous.
Right. Distancing himself from what's about to happen, kind of thing.
Right. Yeah, maybe.
One question you might think about is what's going to happen to the Floerents now. In particular, is Axel going to take Alester's place in the dungeon? Is Alester going to be saved from the flames by Davos?
Yeah, can he use his new power and position to release Alester? Maybe save him from the flames?
Yeah,
and
Alester's still a man of power. I mean, you might want him at the head of your armies, not making decisions.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. Give him the right role, and maybe he will succeed. And on the flip side, we know what Axel threatened to Davos. Should maybe Davos avoid walking near any ledges for the foreseeable future?
I think I would. Are you with Jamie next week?
We are, yes.
That'll be fun. High five.
As I mentioned earlier, we get some. You can do 5, you just can't do high 10. Like I mentioned earlier, we get some additional information about the events that led up to him becoming the Kingslayer, and Roose Bolton lets on about what he plans to do with Jamie and Brienne. So You're definitely going to want to tune in next week and find out what that is.
Excellent. All right. There's 3 ways that you could help us. You could leave us a positive review. You can buy some merchandise at ghostsofharrenhal.threadless.com, or you can buy us a cup of Arbor Gold at buymeacoffee.com/ghostharrenhal, or become a sustainer at the Lord Paramount or Knight of the Realm level and get the beautiful benefits that are associated therewith.
That's right. And as always, you could reach us at ghost.heronhall@gmail.com. You can go out and follow us on Twitter @GhostHeronHall. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Discord, and YouTube.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.